Do you want to start camping or hiking, but you feel like you're a city person through and through and don't have an outdoorsy bone in your body? You're wrong, and here's why. If you have experience living in the city, then you have some translatable skills that can also get you far in the outdoors. There is so much encouragement of going outside and doing things in outdoor recreation that might not seem accessible to the average person who didn't grow up in the outdoors, that make it seem like you need a lot of gear, that make it seem like you need a lot of knowledge, and not just knowledge, like you need expertise. Then it can be pretty discouraging, isolating, and it can feel pretty alienating to even want to start to get into anything in the outdoors. Now, I'm not saying that you don't need to acquire more skills and that there aren't specific new things that you might have to get used to as you become more comfortable camping and hiking and kayaking and doing all the other, whatever the other various things in the outdoors that you want to do are. But I am saying that you might have more skills than you think you do. I say this as a person who grew up in the suburbs of the metro area of Atlanta, Georgia, in the United States. I've spent time in both urban areas and suburban areas and lived in both of those places and have traveled to other places as well. When you're in the city, you know what it's like to have to pay careful attention to your surroundings. There is an obstacle at every turn, somebody who might be your op, who might be your enemy just around the other corner. And you know what it's like to have to be vigilant and have to be attentive to what's happening around you. You pay attention to the way people move. You pay attention to how long somebody's been following you. You pay attention to when a street is quieter than you're used to it being. You pay attention to seeing something that you didn't notice before in an area that you feel like you're well familiar with. You have the qualities of attentiveness that you would need in a camping or hiking or outdoor environment. Because when you're outdoors, you pay attention to what does nature sound like around you? Do you hear any sort of unusual silence? That you just heard all the crickets, you just heard all of the birds, you were hearing all of these noise of the environment that you were in, and all of a sudden you don't hear those anymore. Maybe you hear heavier footsteps than you're used to. Maybe you start to notice where the forest looks a little bit different than it looked where you were before. You start to notice the trail changing and becoming more overgrown. There's a lot more bramble where you're going, so probably people haven't been down that trail in quite a while, or it hasn't been maintained by people in quite a while, and maybe you should take a different route or go back and consult whatever you were consulting to have a lay of wherever you're hiking. The way that you have to be observant in the city can translate to your experience in the outdoors, in nature, where you also have to be very observant. That's what people would call a quote unquote soft skill. So that isn't one of the hard skills that you have to take time learning specific to whatever activity you're taking on in the outdoors. That's something that you probably already know. Another skill that you probably didn't think about is your ability to have good and discerning judgment. You know those spidey senses that you get when you're talking to someone new and something about them seems off or not quite right, or they said something a little weird, or their mannerisms seem a little threatening. There seems like there's something that's about to happen where you probably need to leave that scene pretty soon. You get this feeling that something isn't right and maybe you should remove yourself from that situation. Well, that's your intuition showing up. We know that our experiences in the city have us maybe more cautious than we would be otherwise. But in general, it's probably better for you to take the more cautious route than it is for you to invite more risk in. These feelings that you developed in the city by just knowing how people interact with each other and knowing to trust your gut when something doesn't feel right is something that could definitely translate well in the outdoors. So if you have a feeling that you don't quite understand, that you're coming up to a water crossing when you're hiking and you're like, you know what? I don't think something about this doesn't feel right. And you can't necessarily put your finger on what that feeling is. You can decide to just turn back. There have been times when something didn't feel right for me and I was like, I'm already on this trail. I'm already going this route. We're already taking this line when we're off-roading. We're already going this way, so we might as well keep going in that direction. There's this sunk cost fallacy that it's like, we've already put the time in for the thing, so just keep going. Well, mistakes can be made and we can learn the hard way, but also we can choose to trust our gut, choose to trust our intuition, because at the end of the day, the world is not going to end because we didn't make it to the summit somewhere. The world is not going to end because we cut a backpacking trip a day short. This is something that's often worth trusting in favor of some sort of vanity goal or vanity metric or metric that isn't as important as the weight that we put on it. When you are kind of this type A outdoor adventurous person, then you might be more inclined to push past limits and push past feelings. Oftentimes it's better to trust your intuition and in the end be safe and not have to regret something horrible happening. That leads me to my next point. We are used to horrible things happening. I grew up in the southern United States. I lived in the South pretty much all of my life. And there are a lot of social implications and stereotypes and assumptions that come along with that. Of course, when we do outdoors things, we are navigating feelings of safety and risk. So it's not like you should put all of that to the side, but we also need to be measured and thoughtful about what kind of risks we take. So when we're in the city, we are used to carjackings, we're used to homicide, we are used to armed robberies and break-ins, we are used to petty theft, we are used to shootings in public spaces that may make us afraid to go to large gatherings and social events. We're used to all sorts of things in the city. And a lot of those things happen because of proximity and density of the place that we live in. There is this idea that when you're in a remote place, things become more scary because you're in this place that is unfamiliar. It's so full of terror that we're not used to. It's kind of like the devil that we know, the evil that we know is in the city, and the evil that we don't know is in the forest, in the woods, in the mountain, in some town where only, 2,000 people live. I've faced this idea with some of my friends and people who I'm trying to convince to come camping with me. It's okay for us to go to a place that makes us a little fearful because we don't know it and it feels like it's going to be remote and we feel safer in the city. But I have to remind them that actually we're not safe in the city. We just don't know how to measure our levels of risk and navigate the kinds of risk that we'll face. But just like we did in the city, we can learn that when we are in a place that we're not used to, where we're in a more outdoor environment. Another skill that you probably have already that will translate well from your city life to your wilderness life is your ability to learn from your mistakes and then cultivate fortitude. I'll give you an example. I, many years ago, I left my computer in a trunk after I came back from a road trip. Decided to go directly to a place in the city, and lo and behold, that computer was stolen from the trunk. Never got that computer back. It was a very sad day for me. I learned the lesson that I don't ever leave valuables like that in my car. I don't assume that the trunk is safe. And if I have to leave valuables in my car like that, then I know the added risk that I am taking. I'm not blaming myself for what happened that day, but I am saying that I learned from that experience because I live in a place where I know things like that happen. I had to then correct or improve upon my behavior that's more attuned to the environment that I'm in. It's the same thing when you're in the outdoors. I used to not be fully prepared for the cold. Now I know what kind of base layers I have to have and what kind of R rating my sleeping bag might have to have. Plenty of times I learned things the hard way. I'm sure I will continue to learn things the hard way. I've talked about learning things the hard way in previous videos. I have talked about the time that we went on a backpacking trip in the Everglades and we didn't stake out our tent properly, so the point is, I made that mistake. You will learn things in the outdoors based on mistakes that you make. Don't do them again, or try your best not to do them again. You live, you learn, and then you take action. If you come away from this video having learned nothing else or having believed nothing else that I said, all of those things that seem like they are so far away and out of reach for you, you already have the foundations of that if you have lived in a city. I hope that you're encouraged, and if you have any thoughts about the skills that you feel like will or have translated well from your city life to your wilderness life, then leave them in the comments below. Let me know. I would love to hear them.